Karl Marx was a man who loved to think that the world would be 5 times better if he shut his mouth. But his story is interesting. What made Karl Marx into what he's remembered as today? Nothing good, I assure you. Karl Marx was working at McDonald's for $14 an hour. However, Karl Marx hadn't been getting very much sleep, as he stayed up all night writing. Writing, what you may ask? Well, that isn't important. Karl Marx was poor, so he often blamed anything and anyone that wasn't himself. Karl Marx wasn't the greatest burger chef either, so he would often screw up orders. Eventually, Marx's manager had enough of his orders being screwed up, so Marx was fired and was jobless. Rent was also due that day, but Marx spent the rent money on his toy train collection, so he was kicked out of the house. Karl Marx was now homeless, shivering, and angry, sitting there frustrated, angry, and frustrated. Frustrated and angry. He needed something to blame, an outlet for his problems. He was all out of options, so he devised a plan to blame the very fabric of the system that made the world go round. Capitalism. He wanted to find a way to attack capitalism, but it was impossible until he thought of something. What if everyone was truly equal, and came up with communism? No rich scrubs, but no being homeless. So, I don't know. We're working for the betterment of your people, so that's good. Karl Marx was bitter that he lost the game of capitalism, so he became a crybaby that threw the Monopoly board game at the wall because he lost and you won. Karl Marx called it communism because he liked to use big words to sound less retarded. Karl Marx needed to get his ideology out there, so he bought a musket from the black market and broke it to the headquarters of the local press. He held a musket over a writer's head, making him write about his new ideology. Once the writer was done, he shot him and buried him in the backyard. The police didn't care about the dead writer, but the ideology that was forcibly published into the newspaper. Literally. Fellow losers of Monopoly were beginning to agree with Marx. Sentiment grew. The police eventually found the man who created communism and beat him with a stick. Karl Marx began to flee. He hitched a ride on a horse and headed to Paris, where he could talk about communism. Nobody in France really cared for communism. And the French police were also really angry, and they weren't very hooky-dicky for free speech, either. So Karl Marx hitched a ride on a horse and decided to head to London. Horses can't swim, so Karl Marx swam to London. Once Karl Marx got to London, he met some fellow communists, and founded a friend group called the Commies, and made friends with a man named Logan. Karl Marx needed his ideology fleshed out and set in stone, so he and his friend made a book called Our Ideology, which sold some copies. Karl Marx wanted better conditions for his workers, for life to be fair, for fair laws to be set in place. But he wanted his system to change, and he hated capitalism. However, a bunch of people in Europe with more than half a head took charge, and established laws which made workers' conditions not half as bad as they once were. Karl Marx, however, was surprisingly furious. He didn't want them to change the laws, he wanted to be in charge. Things didn't go Marx's way. He was angry, but he was too old to do anything, so he died, and got a pretty sick-ass grave in his memorial. However, some years later, further east in the country of Russia, things were not going very well. The soil was dirt, they weren't growing anything, and people were hungry. The government was not doing a good job. Capitalism was not doing a good job. But not because of capitalism itself, more the Tsar Nicholas. And the people were fed up. However, there was a guy named Lenin. Lenin read some of Karl Marx's work and tweaked a few things to form a group called the Lenin Lemons, and stormed the capital and took over Russia and decided to try out this new system. In the end, it didn't go very well in the long run. I'm really not in the mood to go into why. I'm sure someone else has done a better job for me. So yeah, Karl Marx was a bit mad. You're not you when you're angry. Make sure to like and subscribe in the next 5 seconds, otherwise you'll become a Marxist.